Hello guys and welcome to my new video, and today I decided to look at what makes healers good or meta. And this has been prompted by the fact that I'm getting so many questions about 9.2, which healers are looking strong, which healers I'm going to main, and basically I decided to make a video to explain to you what makes a healer good and why are people predicting certain healers are going to be strong. Again, this is not going to be ranking healers for 9.2. I think it's far too early. I think the double legendaries are still not available on PTO, which makes me wonder that they might be delayed. So there's still far too many unknowns, but historically speaking, let's look at what made healers really strong in raiding and Mythic Plus, and we'll start off with the shift. So what is the shift? What am I even talking about? I'm crazy, but I feel like at the start of Legion, we saw a big difference in how players optimize their healing, because all of a sudden you saw healers in Mythic Plus, in raiding and things like that, approaching healing in a different way, where you would start using DPS legendaries, approach and use stats that give you DPS. If you remember in Legion, you were able to swap your gear halfway through dungeon, and a lot of healers would have a DPS set and a healing set. And this is when I first saw this happen. Again, I started really to play in Legion and optimize my healing in a way, but I felt this trend continued from Legion onwards into BFA. In BFA, there were people approaching or looking at raiding in terms of what healer is going to provide passive damage without sacrificing healing. In Mythic Plus, what healer can provide the most DPS. And in Shadowlands, I think it kind of reached this expectation that the main difference between a good and a bad healer is the amount of DPS they can output, not healing, but the DPS became the biggest factor to determine which healer was good. And this is stemming mainly from the fact that the biggest differentiation between healers is DPS. Right now, every healer, especially in Mythic Plus and raiding content, has enough HPS to bypass a Mythic Plus boss, a high Mythic Plus boss, a raiding boss. They have enough HPS to provide or help you achieve what you want. And every healer has some sort of utility. There is no healer in World of Warcraft that has zero utility. Whether you're playing Mistweaver with Ring of Peace and Sweep, whether you're playing Holy Priest with things like PI and Mind Soothe, every healer has something to offer. So the differentiating factor between the healers is their DPS, because the DPS is not equal, or there is a lot of difference between like the top two healers right now. So why am I doing this intro? Why am I explaining this? Because anytime a person tells you that this healer or a specific healing class is looking strong for 9.2, they might be referencing their DPS or damage reduction in terms of raiding as the main point of interest, or a thing that differentiates them. And it's very important to understand that in high-end content you probably know about healer DPS, but in lower-end content healer DPS might not be as relevant to you as possible. And this is why it's going to tie into the fact, or at the end of the video I'm going to be talking, should the meta impact your choice of healers in the next patch. But before that, let's go have a look at the raid performance in Sanctum Domination. We don't have the data for the new raid, or enough data in the new raid to determine healers yet. Keep in mind I will be making video later on, but right now what you see is the logs for Sanctum Domination Mythic raiding in terms of HPS. So this is my casing point. Mistweaver Monk is the top HPS healer in Sanctum Domination right now, and you'll notice it's partly due because of the Ventier cooldown reduction to Fallen Order, Ventier specific legendary. You'll notice Refreshing Jade when in stacked fights is really strong, Revival is a lot stronger with the mastery changes, and Mistweaver is really dominating HPS, but yet it's still not considered to be the best healer when it comes to really high-end race to world first content. Don't get me wrong, I feel a lot of the top-end guilds might consider to bring Mistweaver 9.2 with the double legendaries. Maybe there's going to be certain rot type of fights where Fallen Order is going to be really, because you have to remember, Fallen Order really works like, it's not a lot of spike healing, it's more continuous healing throughout the window of Fallen Order. So if there's going to be a lot of fights like this, Mistweaver could carry HPS, but it's still not considered, or it's still not a shoe-in to that Mythic race to world first healing team. So this is my casing point, because it showcases that HPS is not everything. You're looking at damage reduction, you're looking at passive DPS. Passive DPS is something that you can do without sacrificing healing, and very few healers can do that, but Mistweaver can actually do a decent amount of passive damage. Again, these logs are not exactly true because a lot of people are cheesing them, but it does showcase that Mistweaver can do similar damage to Discipline Priest. Against Holy Paladin, if they're optimized pure DPS, they can do a lot of damage. But Mistweaver has 2 of the 3 requirements to become good. They have HPS, insane amount of HPS, and they have passive damage. They don't have damage reduction. Discipline Priest can provide good amount of healing, has barrier, which is 25% damage reduction, but it requires you to stack. That's not a big deal. Even in fights where there's not a lot of stacking, good, mythic, and coordinated guilds will find ways to stack up and use barrier to its fullest. So Discipline Priest, barrier damage reduction is not being showcased here. And it's very, very important to have damage reduction when you're approaching content where you might get one-shot to certain abilities, where there's going to be big AoE damage every 1-2 minutes or something, and damage reduction becomes really strong, to the same extent that Holy Paladin has. Again, you have Devo Aura with Aura Mastery, 15% damage reduction, but it has a 40-yard range. And then Resto Shaman to a lesser extent has Spirit Link, which is 10% damage reduction, but the whole power of Spirit Link comes from the fact that it's going to stabilize the raid. 9.2 is going to have double legendaries. Again, I'm not sure when the double legendaries are going to be unlocked because they're still not available for Mythic testing. 9.2 is going to have tier sets, and a lot of the tier sets right now, if you look at all of the healers, a lot of the tier sets are aimed at increasing the pure HPS of each healer, which means that to some extent, again, it's not true to every healer because some of the tier sets are actually pretty interesting, like Holy Paladin 2 set and 4 set is very, very potent. But you'll notice that it's basically increasing the HPS of each healer, which means that it's not really changing anything. You still have the same kind of 3 pillars of what makes a healer good in high-end raiding: healing, damage reduction, and passive damage. And every single healer that's working in 9.15 is still looking to have a similar niche in 9.2. Don't get me wrong, there's going to be certain Covenant choices, like for example, Discipline Priest is now looking at Ventir and Kyrian as being a pretty potent choice. They're even looking at Scrolled World of Recall, the 9 trinket, as something that might be usable. You're looking at Holy Paladin, who has an options of going Necrolord, Ventir as well. And there is a lot of different changes that are happening towards Covenants, tier sets, double legendaries, but it's not really changing the core aspect of the class enough to shift the meta, in my opinion, unless something really drastic changes like new talents or they changing spells. So this is why a lot of people, when asked what healers they think are going to be strong, especially in raid environment in 9.2, a lot of people will say it's going to be the same, or it's looking to be the same. Discipline Priest is still strong, Holy Paladin is still strong, they provide damage reduction, they provide passive damage, they have good healing. Maybe Resto Shaman for that utility, maybe Mistweaver for specific fights where there's a lot of raw type of damage needed and they need a healer to basically carry the healing. Again, how do I say it? A really early prediction based on historical information rather than the information that's available in 9.2 in terms of double legendaries and in terms of tier sets. What about the HPS healers like Resto Druid? I've recently tested Resto Druid Mythic raiding where they got the 4 set. That is actually really kind of interesting in Mythic raiding because it provides a lot of HPS. But Resto Druid's problem, we're not tied into providing HPS, it's the lack of passive damage, the lack of damage reduction cooldowns, and if it's going to turn out, again, I don't have the complete logs, but if Resto Druid is doing a similar HPS to something like a Discipline Priest or Resto Shaman, there's just no, or Holy Paladin, there's just no reason to bring a Resto Druid over the 3 other healers that I mentioned, because the other healers provide at least damage reduction or passive damage or both. Now let's talk about Mythic Plus, and I honestly feel Mythic Plus could be really fun in terms of healer meta because we have double legendaries, and the double legendaries are an absolute wild card in Mythic Plus because there's so many options. I can guarantee you right now, looking at the double legendaries, there's going to be some people that are gonna come up with some combo that no one really talked about, and it's gonna become really strong, and maybe people are gonna be like, whoa, I didn't really even see that happening. Because look at Resto Shaman, for example. Resto Shaman has 2 options, maybe even more options in terms of legendaries that are not made for Resto Shaman. They're made for Elemental Shaman, but they could work for Resto Shaman in order to provide more DPS in Mythic Plus. And a lot of other classes will possibly have similar combos. They're not even designed specifically for that spec, but they can still be used. In terms of tier sets, if you are a Mythic Plus pusher, you want DPS. You want a tier set that's gonna increase your damage in some shape or form, or has an interaction with some of your damaging abilities. I feel Holy Paladin has really won the lottery in terms of that because of the wing uptime, but you also have to be aware that the new seasonal affix is not data mined, it's not available yet, so we don't know what the seasonal affix is going to be, but I'm willing to bet every healer is gonna try and get legendaries that give you damage, tier sets that give you damage. They're gonna try to optimize their DPS because that's what's happening right now in 9.15. If you look at rated.io information for 9.15 in terms of key levels 25 and up, and these are really, really high, you'll notice Resto Shaman and Holy Paladin are probably the #1 choices right now. Resto Shaman can provide a lot of damage with Kyrian, Vesper, Totem. Holy Paladin, Ventir is really, really strong because in an organized group, your Ashen is going to carry. And I'm not saying that the other healers cannot do these keys because you'll notice there is a lot of the healers who can do 27 keys, 26 keys. So majority of the people who are watching this video right now, they'll be like, okay, for example, I want to play a Mistweaver. I can still do a 25, 26 key. I can do a 27 key if I find a real good group and I push it, but it's going to be a lot less common to see a Mistweaver versus a Resto Shaman or Holy Paladin. It is not impossible though, and this is how the community perceptions build up. Community perception from 25 trickle down to 20s, trickle down to 15 keys, and all of a sudden, people doing 15 keys, they feel like they need a Resto Shaman or Holy Paladin, which is an absolute, it's absurd. You can do 25s with any healer right now. There is going to be a different community perception, but you can do it. You can absolutely achieve it, and community perception has caused a lot of issues because if you're a solo player and trying to get invited to these keys, and you're, let's say, applying for a 23, 24, and you don't get invited even though your IO score is really high, there was probably a lot of Resto Shamans and Holy Paladins applying at the same given time, and you don't get that invite because the Mythic Plus leader is more like, oh hey, I'm gonna have a higher chance of success with Restoration Shaman, Holy Paladin, and these constant declines are going to cause the class to fall. I'm not saying you cannot play Kieran Resto Druid. Kieran Resto Druid in Mythic Plus with the support DPS that's going to provide by empowering a DPS class at the right times when they use their cooldown with the Kieran specific legendary is really, really good, but you have to try a lot harder. The same thing for Discipline Priest and Holy. Well, Holy Priest to some extent is a lot easier to play, but a lot of people will want Discipline Priest, and Discipline Priest requires a lot more optimization to achieve similar numbers, and they probably won't even achieve similar numbers of that similar to Resto Shaman. Resto Shaman just has to put Kieran Totem, activate 3 DPS abilities, activate 3 healing abilities, and you're doing way more damage than a Discipline Priest. Keep in mind, Discipline Priest has PI and things like that, so that's something in terms of the hidden potential or DPS. 9.2, honestly, I think this is going to follow a similar trend, at least for the first few months, until people are going to discover certain double legendaries that are going to be insane. Maybe the new seasonal affix is going to be a lot different. I still feel Kieran Resto Druid is going to be the way to go in 9.2 because of the group's DPS increase. Mistweaver Monk, double legendaries, I think there's going to be some weird combos coming out for double legendaries for Mistweaver because you don't need HPS legendaries, you need DPS for Mistweaver. Discipline Priest, again, Discipline Priest is going through a lot of different Covenant choices right now. I'm not even sure what the best Covenant is going to be for Mythic Plus. I'm not even sure what the double legendary combo is going to be. To some extent, Holy Priest is always going to be running Flash Concentration because I think that should just become a talent at this point. But Holy Paladin, again, Ventir has always been really strong. Necrolord is kind of creeping in there as well. There is going to be certain choices. Resto Shaman, I think Kieran is still a really, really solid DPS build, and double legendaries are only going to make Resto Shaman stronger. So right now, it's hard to predict because I think there's going to be wildcards with double legendaries. But this leads to our next segment. Should meta affect you or impact your choice for your healer in 9.2? And the answer is probably no. I talked about what makes a healer good in raids, what makes a healer good in Mythic Plus, the fact that you have damage reduction, passive DPS, HPS in raids, the fact that you can provide a lot of DPS in Mythic Plus can really make your healer really popular, or community perception go towards that healing class. But the fact is, this game is extremely casual. It is very casual to an extent that healer meta does not... it only impacts very few people. We're talking about thousands of people out of possibly a couple of million of players playing right now. To give you an example, this is the Mythic Plus seasonal cutoff for United States, USA. So if you, on Alliance side, have achieved KSM, so this is almost, I would say, a bare minimum right now in Mythic Plus, because KSM is probably it's extremely easier to achieve in Season 2 because how the seasonal affixes Tormentors work. Really easy compared to something like Prideful, where you mess up the count and Prideful is going to spawn at the wrong times. So I feel that getting KSM at this given point is a lot easier than other seasons. So if you achieved KSM on US Alliance side, you're in the top 10% of the player base. Top 10%. And throughout the whole video I talked about meta classes, and I only feel that meta classes really make impact in something like 25, 26 keys, and I don't think you need to have meta specs for 25, 26. You can still do 25, 26 as a Mistweaver Monk. But I feel like you start looking for those interactions between different specs, having a Rogue, Windwalker, Frost Mage, really, really strong combinations. Maybe having a good coordination between a tank and a healer, for example. A really popular option right now is a Prot Paladin and Resto Shaman, or a Guardian Druid and a Holy Paladin. And these combinations are going to make those keys a little bit easier, but majority of people are not reaching those levels, but they're following the meta. It trickles down to these levels. And it really shouldn't. When you're looking for a Mythic Plus key, the main things you kind of should be looking for is, do I have the right covenant for the dungeon I'm doing? Do I have a battle res available, maybe an engineering battle res at worst cases? Do I have bloodlust or heroism in this group? These are the only things that you really need to make your key easier, and you don't even need those for a plus 15s or even 20s to some extent. So I feel the community has to some extent, I'm not gonna say gone crazy, but this meta from the top 0.1% of players is trickling down. And I feel a lot of players who are looking to just get their 15s done are forced almost to play a class that they don't want in order to get invited, which is just ridiculous. You should be playing the class that you really enjoy, and if you have an option, like for example, in my option, I play Resto Shaman. Resto Shaman is really kind of meta, but I like Resto Shaman. I enjoy Resto Shaman. I play every single healer out there, and a lot of the times I'll pick a healer that's quite good in all content because I enjoy Mythic Plus and I enjoy raiding and I enjoy doing high-end Mythic Plus and high-end raiding, and I feel Resto Shaman really covers all of those bases. In 9.2, I'm looking to step away from Shaman, but Shaman is still looking like one of those type of healers that's gonna cover all of those bases. So who knows? But all I'm trying to say is that don't get bogged down in meta too much, because this game is a lot more casual than you think. So to summarize the whole video, I don't want to ramble on too much, but generally speaking, the things that make healers good in 9.15 is probably going to make healers good in 9.2. Possibly double legendaries making a big shift in something like Mythic Plus, because I do feel there's going to be some wildcard double legendaries coming out. I still feel the concept of raiding healer, damage reduction healing, and passive DPS, where you can deal damage without sacrificing healing, is still very important in high-end raiding. It's not mandatory. You do not need to run these, especially if you're trying to get, you know, the achievements months after the raid has been released. You don't need to run the healers that, you know, Race to World First were running. In Mythic Plus, I do feel that community perception to some extent is not ruining the game, but it's really impacting a lot of players in lower end content, and it's making them think that, hey, if I invite a Mistweaver monk in a plus 15, I can't do this key because no one's playing Mistweaver monk, which is absolutely absurd. And I feel this is the wrong mindset to have, and this is why I'm making this video. I want to showcase in this video that this game is very casual, and majority of people are not reaching a point where they need that meta class for Mythic Plus, for raids, but they're still forced to use it. Don't get trapped into playing a healer that you don't enjoy because you feel you need to play the meta healer. Don't feel like that unless you feel like you really want to be, you know, top 0.1% of something. So this is the general consensus of the video. I didn't want to make it this long, but I feel this is an important message to send out. I feel for the people looking for the best healers in 9.2, I'm gonna be making a video based on what I see in terms of tier sets, double legendaries later down the line, when double legendaries are actually available for testing, because that's something that's actually going to impact the meta right now, because the tier sets for majority of healers, they're not providing DPS, they're providing HPS, which is only one aspect of what makes a healer good. I'm waiting for the double legendary testing. Let me know how I feel about this video. Let me know what healer you're going to main in 9.2. For the people who are asking what healer I'm going to main, I still don't know. I'm going to be deciding the last couple of weeks of the patch release. Let me know, and I'll see you in my next video.